Thanks for that lovely intro. Thank you guys for being here today. This is the music of TV and film. My name is Josh Briggs. I'm general manager at Terrorbird Media in LA, which is among many other things, a third-party licensing company and publishing administrator. So I'm going to be moderating this panel with two lovelies next to me here. To my left, Laura Katz. She is primarily do film music supervision, taking care of half of that title right there. She had upwards of 4 movies at this year's Sundance. Is that right? 2.
But I had 5 last year.
5 last year. That averages out to 3.5. We're going to round it up to 4 a year. She's at 4 a year. Also, film credits like Chappaquiddick, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, Dark Places.
Wow, good memory.
Thanks. I'm trying, you know. We pitch a lot of music to you, Laura.
I use a lot of music.
That's absolutely true as well. So please give it up for Laura. And on the end is Michael Perlmutter from Instinct Music in Canada. Came all the way over here for paneling purposes. He primarily works in the TV realm on shows that broadcast all over the world, not just in Canada. Shows like The Handmaid's Tale, Altered Carbon, and a show that's very important to our company, a show called Queer as Folk. Just we liked it. And among many, many other projects. So please give it up for Michael. So I wanted to start out by just the quick audience poll of how many of you are artists? Music makers. Okay, cool. How many are like labels or other industry kinds of, maybe managers, anything like that, helping out artists? Okay. And how many of you have licensed music to a project of any kind? Film, TV, ad, web video, etc. Okay, cool.
This could be hello? Is this on? Hi, Todd. This could be a first. I like it.
Awesome. Good. You have. Okay. Great. So, this is your time and your money, so I want to keep this on like subjects that are meaningful to the audience. So we'll have plenty of time for questions, but I want to make sure we're covering some basic ground, but just kind of keep it to like the details of like what's important, how to license your music to projects like what these guys work on and beyond, and make sure there's plenty of room to get to anything else you guys want covered without getting like too deep in the weeds. So just to start, you guys obviously both work on like different kinds of projects, and you both have worked on different levels of projects with maybe different budgets, different, where you're maybe brought in at different points. But like typically, where do you guys come in the process of a project being created? Is it like, script stage? Is it during production? Is it in post? Like, where are you coming in?
Okay. On film, it really depends on what the filmmakers want. Mm-hmm. I would say on average it's in post during director's cut, but sometimes it's script, especially if they have on-camera music. Because if you film music, whether it's being played or someone singing on camera, then you need to make sure you have those rights ahead of time. Otherwise, you're going to have to cut it out of your movie, which happens all the time because people don't hire us early enough. But usually it's in post, and when they have a rough idea of what the movie looks like and how much music they need so that we can budget appropriately of how we want to split up the money.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
I'm from Toronto. I don't know if anyone's been here, but I'm very happy to be in Boise. I think it's called Boise, right? Good, right. I got it right.
Pandering to the locals. I like
know,
it.
I'm a local. I'm very, very thrilled to be here. One of the, other than wanting to be here, one of the main reasons I'm here is just to hijack the conversation for a second. I'm working on a TV show called Spinning Out, and Spinning Out is based in Hockley, Idaho, which is I believe a fictional town. I looked it up to see if there was a Hockley. I don't think there's a Hockley here. Is that right? Well, we're going to make one. But it's the series is shooting in Toronto, And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I'm very much looking forward to meeting and seeing and hearing a lot of talent from Idaho and the surrounding states. So there you go. We come in at various levels of production. It could be pre-production, it could be during, it could be post. I've come in on movies where it's done and locked and we have 2 months and we have to find 12 songs and basically you just drop everything you're doing, which is other clients.
I've come in with 3 weeks.
3 weeks. This is like Name That Tune. I can do that film in 3 weeks. I can do that film in 2 weeks. In TV, we're usually there before they start shooting. What we do typically is we want to be there beforehand because we want to get a bunch of songs into the editor's hands as they're on the treadmill of editing TV series and episodes over a 6-month period. And to Laura's point, there are lots of times that we have to get involved early because there's on-camera stuff. I think the one thing that's really important for us and for the collaborators is to get in as soon as possible. So when we pitched for this show called Spinning Out, we put together a whole playlist of artists to get the job. And once we got the job, we got all the scripts about 3 weeks to a month before they started shooting, because there was so much. It's a skating drama, so there's so much figure skating that we needed a lot of on-camera music that had been cleared, approved, figuring out what the budgets were of that, and then preparing it for the on-camera skate.
Does everyone get that? Like what he means by on-camera in that instance? It's not like the band playing at the party, but in that case, it's figure skaters skating. They have to actually choreograph routines just like you would if you were a figure skater skating at the Olympics, right? That's
exactly it.
So you're just trying to recreate that world in music. In general, I mean, that's really the job of the music supervisor, right? Is to find licensing at its core, right? Is really like the square peg in a round hole thing. You're taking pre-existing music and trying to fit it to a scene that in many cases already exists, or that you're going to kind of form the two around each other. But like at the you're still world building. You are, whether it's a show like that's heavily based in reality, or then like a post-apocalyptic show, or a futuristic show like Handmaid's Tale or whatever. You're still trying to like support the scene and doing everything you can, whether it's a minor cue, 2 characters talking over coffee, or a major thing like you're choreographing a championship figure skating tournament that like you're still trying to build things that would exist in that world. Does that?
Yeah, that makes sense. And it depends on the needs of the production, basically, right? So there's a film, for example, I worked on that I got a call 3 weeks before they were mixing, and all the cues were background cues. So the editor had placed the directors had placed these songs all in the background. So it wasn't anything that was specifically like a montage where it's edited specifically to the beats and synchronized, to certain cuts of the edit. So in that case, 3 weeks was not a long time, but luckily there were independent bands and they were easy to contact and they were easy to license from. So in that case, it was okay. But if you've got, we got a call the other day about a film that's shooting and they want to have, I think it's maybe a karaoke scene with a Lady Gaga song. And I think they shoot in 3 weeks. So I don't know if we're working on that or not. It was a conversation that a colleague of mine had with the director. And but if there are any filmmakers in the audience, don't do that. Just come to us. Come to a supervisor much earlier.
Just say a karaoke scene. If it's got to be karaoke, you can figure it out together, right? Because any license, you got to license 2 things, right? You have to license the master recording and the underlying composition, the actual song. So even in that case, even with karaoke, and you're not using the Lady Gaga song that you hear on the radio, you're using the karaoke master recording. You still have to license that from a karaoke company, probably, or have someone make it.
If you see the lyrics on screen, you have to get additional permission to see the lyrics on screen, which I learned the hard way.
Which is probably what you might see like something blurred out, or maybe you never see the back of that karaoke monitor if they're coming in early enough to actually cut around that, right? If it's already been shot, you might not have a choice. And it's like, well, now you doubly effed yourself. We can't cut away from that. We have to just go license this thing. And then oftentimes the publisher who controls the composition or the master owner, they're aware of that fact, and they know that you're kind of between a rock and a hard place. And so
Well, we try not to tell them.
that's fair. That's
We
the
try
right.
not to tell them, and then they just have to edit it out if we can't actually get the Lady Gaga song or whatever it is.
Right. And so you mentioned something, Michael, that I imagine is a way both of you have worked in a lot of different ways, which is you're pitching to get a job in the first place. And so you might be compiling music, or let's say you've even gotten the job and someone you worked with before, but you're kind of creating essentially like, just a mixtape that might inform other music licensing for your project. And you're just pulling stuff, right? You're just saying, you're saying this is what I think might fit in this film or this show. Like, how are you building? Are you reaching out to people at that point to get ideas even at that stage, or is that likely coming from your own mind or your teams?
I don't do that often, mostly because the projects I work on are very tightly budgeted, and directors have a hard time understanding when things are just reference. And I don't really ever want them to get anything we can't afford. And so from the beginning, if I send anything, I've at least had a few conversations to understand ballpark what we're looking at financially. Except in the rare occasion where we're looking to maybe get an original song or something that isn't already pre-existing in one way or another, then I'll say, what about this artist? What about this artist? I haven't checked anything yet. Let's just have a creative conversation. But usually, if I'm sending anything to the director or producer, I've checked a little bit first.
Okay. And so, all right, so that answers that question for me. Michael, do you work any different? Do you ever pulling idea, like how often are you pulling those initial ideas from, say, like what you pulled together to get the spinning out job to then actually try to license into the program? Or are you waiting to see what comes out the creative?
That's a good question. I think it really depends on the job, but 90% of the time our budgets in my lovely country, which is Canada, are not very high. So we know that we can't put 4 Kings of Leon songs and 3 Radiohead songs and 14 Built to Spill songs in there. So we have to be very, very cautious and really look at a budget properly to understand that if you have X amount of dollars, you might be able to afford a song that's a little bit more expensive than, let's say, an independent artist whose hopefully songs won't be as expensive, even though we'd love to give you as much money as possible, independent artists. Sometimes it's just not possible. So when we pitched, for example, for the show Spinning Out, it was a little bit of everything, and it was just to give kind of a sonic palette of what we thought the show could sound like. But there's everything in there. It was everything from, I did a little bit of research and put Analette in there, I put Hill Folk Noir in there, I put Built to Spill in there. We put a bunch of other artists that were big artists, more popular artists, but it's just to get a vibe now. Having said that, this show has a little bit more money than most of the shows that we work on. So we took some of those and we did send it. Don't tell Terrorbird any of that. We did take some of those songs and actually pitch them. But we hadn't seen all the scripts yet. We had seen one script. So once we see the scripts, and then once we knew all of the music that we had to provide for the on-camera skating, that took up some of the budget. So now we have to work almost backwards a little bit, which is fine. But it really, it depends. For films, sometimes you have, well, you said you have 3 weeks or a month. Some films have 6 months to a year. So you can really play with it. I worked on a film 7 years ago. I got the film, and he said, we have 3 months, and I have $10,000, but I'd like a Bjork song, and I would like a Bebo Gilberto song, and I said, it's really nice to want, and it's really nice to like, but here's the reality of the situation. So we went and spent $110,000 because he went and raised more money, and it was great because I got him the Bjork song, and we put in I think it was I found a Grimes song. It was her first placement ever, and a few others. So if you can convince the director or the producer that if music is that important to your show and your storytelling, you need a little bit more money. However, which we can talk about at some point, the value of your copyrights, unfortunately, have kind of been devalued a bit. Now, there's a few other industry folks in the audience, and they can speak up at any time. but sometimes you can license
Not any
stuff.
time, but
You can license stuff for $20,000. You can license stuff for $1,000, and a lot of people like to license. The producers like to license the $1,000 or $2,000 songs, but we can get into that later.
yeah.
That's a philosophical conversation.
Yes, that is. I did want to. I mean, that's kind of part of the premise of this panel is like because I think we can all agree it's sort of a golden age for content, right? Like the projects these guys are working on are, there's more opportunity even for indie films to get distribution. Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, even now like, Facebook, Snapchat, AT&T, et cetera, are all looking for original content for the internet, and they're putting money behind it. They're putting a lot of money into production, and unfortunately, some money, and in some cases, a lot of money into music. But like, that's the question. It's like, is it a golden age for you as rights holders? And I do think that is, like that's sort of a question mark. But I do want to talk a little bit about budgets in general right now, like, and just sort of the team around you, how you work, because I think that's important for you guys in the audience making music or trying to get your music licensed as independents. Like, the concept of gatekeepers and really like who is, because I always feel like you guys have them too, right? How often do you have the last word in music in a project?
I'll have the last word on this one. Go ahead.
Almost never.
Okay. Who does?
You might more often than I do. I would say it's usually to the director's chagrin, the producer. Although sometimes...
Sorry, even for film?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Although, the more established directors definitely have more say. And also I have been in cases where we had a $50,000 source budget, and after the director got involved, we had over $1 million. But that was the one time, and I don't think that will ever happen again.
No, that's pretty
and
good.
that's because we spent it on like huge songs from Motown and whatever.
Right.
But usually I'll get on a page with the director, and then the producer will come in and be like, never mind any of that. But
Sorry, because of budget or because of creative?
Because they don't like it. And
Which is interesting, a non-creative role as a producer,
Right.
making creative decisions on a project. It probably sounds familiar to most people in this room, and whatever walk of life you're in, that somebody who maybe doesn't have the best perspective on something is trying to dictate how you do your job.
Yeah, definitely. But I also do think that, the director and we can sort of like get deep down into something, and sometimes a fresh perspective is nice, but oftentimes it's definitely not appreciated. So it depends. But I would say I did licensing before I was supervising, and between those I've done around 75 movies. And I would say on 5 of them, my decisions mattered a lot, which is a very small percentage. And I did one video game where basically I was just like, I like this song. And they were like, okay, cool. And that was the best experience of my life.
Right, like that's the dream. That's what everyone
Being the
thinks being a
boss.
music supervisor is. It's just like, oh yeah, I love. Basically, you think it's just like DJ for movies, right? Or like making mixtapes.
And actually on that project too, basically everything I've said so far was not true. Like I got to go through my own personal music taste collection and say like, oh, this is what I think we should use, and I think we should spend this much money on it. And they were just like, okay.
Because it's also like a fraction of what they spent on like.
And it was
rotoscoping or
amazing,
whatever.
and the bands were like so appreciative. Like one of them said they got to tour Europe on the money that I licensed the one song for, which
Wow.
I never get to say in indie film ever.
Yeah. Well, I also was going to sidebar because that's like one of our favorite things at Terrorbird is when you get a license for someone and they tell you how much it actually impacted their life and career, because it can be a lot of money. It can be a life-changing amount of money. Sometimes it's rent money, sometimes it's grocery money, sometimes it's no money at all. But other times it is, it really can be like, oh, you just gave me a salary, right? Like you just gave me like, this is the money I need to then go make the thing I want to make, go tour where I want to tour.
Yeah, that's like the dream. I think the other thing though to say about indie film, especially in the 2010s, it's harder and harder. It's easier to find content, but it's harder and harder to put a movie together. So on most independent films, there's a lot of producers. There's not like 1 or 2, there's like 25. And they all have different opinions. And they all put me in the middle. and I'm the one who has to like somehow translate all of those opinions into what we then present to the director, or what the director and I then say, this is how we're going to like show this to the producers. And sometimes you have to figure out who's the producer that actually makes the decisions, and it's not really that easy to tell.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a lot of people. It's definitely like the classic too many cooks in the kitchen situation. But at the same time, it's awesome because we get more movies, we get more projects, we get more content, more people are being represented that weren't represented before. But it's a pros and cons.
So a couple things very interesting about your producer. In any film that I've worked on, it's been the director. It's always been the director. It's there. They may have been the writer also, so they have this vision of what they want sonically the film to sound like. So I've never. The producer might come in and say, "Sorry, we can't afford that." That's about it. That's from my vantage point. For TV, because directors come in and out of TV, they do one director might do a block of 2 episodes and then go to the edit suite and do what they call a director's cut of that, and then they're gone. So the producer, the creative producer of a TV show, is the consistent creative person that I deal with. So when we pitch songs, it's usually I'm dealing with the editors or the creative producer. Sometimes what I do is I'll pitch 4 songs, but I know that 2 of them aren't the best, and I'd be happy for them to choose the other 2. So then I'm not making the final decision, as Laura said, because 99% of the time we don't. So then I'll be happy that they choose one of the other 2. I know this is being broadcast, so I hope all your producers out there are hearing this. So that happens too. The other thing I wanted to say, maybe 25% of a music supervisor's job, and I'll talk personally, Laura can add to it, maybe 25% of my job is creative. There are still 24 hours in the day, and it still takes many hours to find the right song, but there's 1,000 other things that go on when you're managing a project, or you have meetings, or you go to the edit suite, or you sit in a spotting session where you watch an episode or you watch the film and you find out where music's going. There's tons of administration, and then there's problem solving and negotiating. So I find it's 25%. I might even say 20%, but I don't know how you feel about that.
So many conference calls.
A lot of calls, a lot of people asking 1,000 questions. I find it more on a film, even in the TV show. I'm working on a film now that's shooting in Montreal, and the director is also the producer. He's also going to be the editor. I think he's even in the film. It's insane, and he's an insanely smart cat. The film is called Dreamland, and I think it's going to be quite good. It's about the opioid crisis. In case it comes out later this year, you can all go see it. And he is involved in every single decision, down to probably what kind of coffee I'm going to have tomorrow. And I actually really appreciate that, because he is so invested. I think he's invested some of his own money, and maybe that's why he's so invested, but he's so invested in every minute detail. And I actually like working with that kind of a challenge, and I like working with that kind of challenge with artists who are very detailed in how they produce their music and how they present their music to us or to the world.
You guys both, I think I just want to pivot this slightly to what you guys were talking about right there. Is also then, so okay, 25% of your job's creative. There's a lot of hands in the pie for approvals. Budgets are all over the map. They might even shift mid-project. How do you find music in the first place, right? Because like we said, if you've got to license 2 things, you've got to license a recording, usually owned by a record label, license a composition, sometimes controlled by a publisher. Maybe you're going to a licensing company or whatever. How often are you...
What licensing company?
I've heard Terrorbird's pretty good.
Okay.
Pretty, just saying, I don't want to... Yeah, there's Terrorbird.com. But how often are you going to, so people who represent other artists, rights holders themselves? How often are you getting stuff directly from artists?
That's a really good question. So I started supervising a while ago, and when I went into the job, it was already a company who had been doing it. There were maybe 1,000 CDs in the library, and CDs are those round things that you put in. There's no side B, it's just a side A. And that's where I started, other than being a music fan for the first 30, 40 years of my life, obviously. But You know, you start there. I went out 4 or 5 nights a week for about 4 years, and I didn't even think I had a job. I was really enjoying it, as you can imagine, but you had to work the next day, which was fine, but I was so jazzed, and still am jazzed about what I do. But as you get involved in the industry, even if you start from scratch, which I semi-started from scratch, you meet people. And this is a very, as you know, a social business, and it's a business of, you know, we like to say, we try to be as authentic as possible in the kind of music that we want and the people that we meet and who we want to deal with. That's how I would start. And then you meet more people through all those people. And then you reach out to record labels and publishers, you reach out to the third-party agents, and I have traveled in many countries in the world to listen to new kinds of music and meet people like yourselves and the industry here, and it just snowballs. It just snowballs, and so you get, we deal with a lot of artists also, not just the third parties or not just the labels or the publishers. We do a lot of one-on-one. We might not get back to people very quickly because we have a lot of emails that come through. For example, there's some companies, music supervision companies, that won't accept unsolicited material. It has to come from someone they know or a third party. Very important. We take everything and anything because, as I once was told, you never know who's going to walk in your door. It could be your new best friend, your wife, your partner, your business partner, the greatest signing that you've ever had if you're with a label.
Your
like to talk
worst
to
enemy?
everybody, or your worst enemy. But you have to keep them closer, right? So you never know.
Do you and like more like specific senses? What do you like if does it change based on the project, or like how are you seeking out music? You need a song for whether it's a skating competition or if it's for, you know, soldiers in Afghanistan to be listening to inside their Humvee. Like, who are you reaching out to get like that music, or how are you seeking that out?
For some projects, I do have an email list where I have all my trusted licensors, which are usually pitch companies like yourself. And then for some projects where I know exactly what I want and I know exactly what I have to spend for it, and I know bands personally, then I'll reach out to them. If they don't have people working with them, because I don't want to deal with them and then have to redo the whole process with their licensors. But I think it really does depend on the project, and everything he said I agree with.
That's good. Nice. That's the first.
And sometimes I don't even know where I was going with that.
There's
a couple other things. Firstly, there's a thing called Spotify, which is amazing, or Apple Music, or whatever you use. There's also SoundCloud. And so if I'm, for example, get a SoundCloud link from somebody and I listen to it, I'm like, that's pretty good. They have this recommended kind of section, right, where you start listening to 1,000 other artists out there. And it just snowballs from that. Mm-hmm. And then you find out that one artist, that independent, is on a small label in Romania, and then you are introduced to that label. Or, for example, I'm coming here and I'm going to meet some artists, hopefully, or labels or whatever, and that will allow me to meet a lot of other people. So it's word of mouth. It goes forever. We're lucky in this industry now with I don't know if we're lucky or not lucky, but it's a blessing and a curse. Sometimes the internet is an incredible source of music. Before the internet, we would have, songs faxed to us type of thing. So we'd have, stacks of 300-400 CDs a week that you'd have to get through. And jamming. I've broken a couple of players, as we all have. And, people send cassettes because, I think I had a cassette player. I didn't think I tossed it out. So you just keep going. You just got to snowball, and it's a really good question. And we're not trying to run around the answer, but I think like in any business, you just have to. And our business is to dig for music, so you have to find the resources. So for you guys, for people living in Idaho or wherever, if you're an independent artist, sometimes the pitch agents are really, really good route. There's many of them. There's probably only one here. But there's many of them, and you've got to reach out to folks who might have a roster that's similar or different. Because if you're the same kind of an artist on their roster and they have 15 other, alt rock bands or country bands or whatever it is, you might get lost in that roster. I know I'm going off topic. You can bring me back.
That's I want to know. So within that, you mentioned music discovery, like just kind of going down a Spotify or SoundCloud wormhole, which I think everyone is like a music fan has done, and which is cool to hear, right? Because you might just get discovered. Hopefully, you get it in time for the scene they need now.
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
To say that things take so long, and not like individual projects, although they can too, but like I went to a conference in Finland and I saw this band from Belarus and I immediately was like, this is the best thing. It wasn't in English. I had no idea what they were saying, but it was amazing. And I'm like, but I'll never be able to use this. But I put it in a movie 4 years later. Comes out today, Hotel Mumbai.
Yeah.
And so that can happen. It's just like, I think we're patient as music supervisors. And if artists are patient too, it just, if we love your music, doesn't mean we have a project that it works for. But I think we'll keep it in our minds, and if that project shows up, we'll remember you.
Right, and I think every music supervisor has some. They have their own methods for cataloging stuff and whatever else. A quick sidebar, and just say that also means make sure your contact information is somewhere available on the internet. Right, if you're completely independent, make sure there is, even if it's just info@bandname or your bandname @gmail, whatever. Make sure there's some way for them to contact you if they like something. If you're sending music to a music supervisor who does collect unsolicited submissions, make sure you're sending your music in a file format that retains metadata so that you can put your contact information in there as well. Like, it's very important so that they know, like, yeah, when it circles back. I can't tell you how awesome that is to even hear as a licensor, that we are, as someone who's trying to license music to these projects, that like, we see it occasionally. We'll send out, say, like a sampler or something like that, and then 9 months later, someone responds to that email thread, like, hey, you got an instrumental of this? Like, there's just, and it might even still be exploratory, but it still is just like.
I mean, it's often like 5 years later.
Yeah, I believe, yeah, totally. I mean, that's the thing, especially when you're working on film timelines, right? Like, it could be, yeah, just like, oh, I was working on these other 2 projects. Those took 2.5 years. So yes, by the time I'm now on this other thing,
and we get
and
so
thinking
many
about other
emails.
music, right?
That it takes so long to even get to your email, even if we're trying to read all of our emails, which not all of us do.
Yeah.
But I do try. But it takes me like 5 years to get to an email I get today if it's not related to a project I'm working on right now.
Interesting. So that's, I mean, that all is like, yeah, I mean, this gets to this point with like, about being patient, where I think it's important to remember as a music creator, any person working in this business, it's hard to think, like, we get so many other things that are instant grat, right? Like everything that you can, right, you can find things immediately, whatever else, but like, to not try to focus on like the song you did today that you're the most excited about now. It's not going to be the last song you ever do, and it's not going to be, and like, even just because you might even think for licensing, like, oh man, this would have been so perfect in this movie I just saw, or whatever, in an episode of Handmaid's Tale. I wish that could have been my song in the end titles, right? To know that, like, well, next season might come around, it might switch directions completely. They might like something you put out 5 years ago. They might not get around to your song for 2 years. I do think it's it's just like an important lesson, but that it all matters and is all sort of part of that same piece.
And I think one of the things is that really good music, which is very subjective, so just that's another panel or conversation you can have at night, but
about the goodness of music. I think that's actually the listening panel on Saturday at 3:30 right here.
For us at least, it rises to the top, let's say. And what I mean by that is that we might listen to 75 songs and only 5 or 6 of them kind of hit us for projects we're working on, or something that we might work on. We might not know what it is, obviously, but if it's really good, we're going to hold on to that. And I did the same thing in Finland, oddly enough. 2 years later, licensed a song, and they were blown away. I mean, I was blown away. I'm happiest to listen to great music, because that means that I can keep my jobs and I can, pay for my cereal that I have every day or something like that. So good music is something we need, and we're very cognizant of listening, even if it takes a while. It has nothing to do with whether we can get back to you quickly or not. It has to do with the volume of songs that we get. And that's a good thing, because we like to think that we're going to listen to everything that's sent to us. For example, pitch agencies like Terrorbird, they send out blasts every month. So I might not get to every one of their blasts every month. Sorry. But I'll get there eventually. I will get there and I'll listen to the music and go, these 3 of 10 are really good for, maybe it's this film I'm working on now or a show, or nothing at all, but I'll put it in some folder, whatever I call that folder. So know that if you are writing music that is obviously is good in your eyes and hopefully good in our eyes, at some point down the road, it might be right for a scene. I have a friend of mine in publishing who said there's a song for every scene. I don't know if that's true, but the philosophy of that kind of makes a little bit of sense.
I also think because of how long it takes, sometimes a band might break up before I need to use their music, and then they've like disappeared and there's no way to contact them. And I think if you've broken up, it would still be cool to make money from your music. So make sure that you still have that information out somewhere. Like this just happened to me and it was really annoying.
Yeah, R.I.P. MySpace. That's like really going to be, but it is important. Yeah, to like, that's also register your songs with the performing rights organization, register them, so that way like there's public contact information available. So when someone is researching your music, they can find it again, even if you're independent. If, I wanted to say several things, but that's fine. If, I think there's a specific question I had, I know we'll get back to some general stuff because like, it's very easy to like get off on these on like helpful tangents. I feel like I think it's a very important perspective to have like on the timeline for everything and how you guys discover music. I wanted to get back to that for one quick second. So you might go down a Spotify wormhole, you might go down a SoundCloud wormhole, you might go through your own iTunes or whatever else, your personal record collection. Now, how often are you using like a music library, a non-exclusive thing to store your music? There are like countless versions of this versus like going down kind of more, I'll just call it like consumer or fan oriented things like a Spotify or SoundCloud or your own collection of music. Does that make sense?
I don't understand that question.
You got like an audio socket. I don't know what else is out. There's like a million of like music libraries, or you could just say like,
to search ourselves.
I need a song that talks about being the best.
I never do that.
Okay.
I don't think I have done it. Although there are a bunch of record labels and music publishers that have this kind of search engine where you type in sad, alternative rock, male vocal, and then boom, these songs show up.
All of their songs show up?
Maybe, yeah. And no wonder I've never been able to get through them. I've never used that either. Just to go back for a second, one of the things that we do is we send out what we like to call them a blast. And the blast is for the show Spinning Out, for example, the skating show I was talking about, we would send out an email to 200-300 sources, whether they're labels, third-party pitch agencies, independent artists, a music publishers association, anybody and everybody we think would have some music for our show. And in that blast is a nicely typed out description of what we're looking for, budget parameters, style, maybe obviously a synopsis of the series, the kinds of songs we're looking for, whether this kind of emotional song or a breakdown song or a relationship song, etc. So then we get a pile of emails back. So that's one way if you get on a supervisor's radar. Some of them do those blasts. I don't know if you do. We don't do them a ton, because then we would get a cajillion songs and then we could never listen to anything. But sometimes we do.
It is important if you get one of those emails, if you do manage to get on one of those lists for anybody, that you are following the directions, right? If someone has, like Laura is like literally a pioneer, along with Lauren from Terrorbird, they basically created metadata standards for the Guild of Music Supervisors, which is a professional organization of which Michael is also, what's your title for the Canadian Guild?
It starts with a P.
President?
Yeah.
The Prez.
But
the Prime Minister.
like
He's the Prime Minister
us,
of the Guild of Music Supervisors.
There are 23 of us in Canada, and we're very, very proud to be supervisors.
So it's very, they talk literally, like there are meetings, there are events, there are newsletters, there are all these things. And, so it is important if someone is telling you like, I want music delivered like this. I need you to make sure that you include, X, Y, or Z. I don't want more than 5 songs. I want instrumentals only.
No
whatever.
attachments.
No attachments to emails. Like any of those instructions, everyone's a little bit different, but the reality is like you'll start to get a sense if you start getting these like what's expected, and don't think you're ever like thinking outside the box by like sending them something they're not asking for, right? Does that seem to track? I mean, unless it's like specifically about the music, if it's like, hey, I didn't have anything for this. However, if you are I see you're looking for stuff around this, in case this ever comes in handy, here you go. That might be acceptable. Whereas like, you know, trying to masquerade as something else is another thing, right? That kind of goes back to like the contact info on your website. If you send someone music and you include like RIYLs, or, you know, recommended if you like, any kind of, you know, where they might be kind of using their inbox like it's Google. Like if you put that I'm a rapper from Boise, right? Boise, that you will, that you make sure that that's in there and that it's real. It's like, because it's fun maybe for your press release to be like kind of cute about stuff, but I think it's much more important to be accurate and informative when you realize like the kinds of timelines these guys are on. They might not get this stuff for months or years, literally. So like if you're just trying to get on their radar and trying to get stuff in there or get your music used ever, that it's important to kind of also be like factual and to the point.
We don't really have much to add to that. That was very good. I would also suggest, though, if we're looking for a certain kind of music and you don't have it,
Don't tell us.
Don't send hardcore metal when we're looking for really sweet singer-songwriter country music. And a lot of people do that. And a lot of people do that, and none of them are in this room. Just so you know, none of them. I can guarantee you, none of them are in this room. And it's a very strange thing. And the reason they do that is because that's the artist or song that they're supposed to pitch because it's about to go to radio or something like that, and it kind of puts a little bad taste in your mouth. And you want to go to trusted sources. You want to go to people who will not just follow directions, because follow directions, yes. I mean, that almost sounds a little, you know, but we do have directions, and we have directions so that because timelines are tight. So if you're on that path and you're in that world, that's great. Send some music. But if you don't feel like you have something, then don't. And I mean, that just goes. And even for our world, we can't pitch a song for a scene to a producer that's a hardcore metal song when we're really looking for, you know, a country singer, because that'll kind of get us fired.
Right. I mean, it's what marries well with the scene, right? If it's going to take you out of it, we've all seen stuff. I mean, to me, there's even like scores now that don't age well, that it just sounds like Jerry Goldsmith is the name. I'll throw Jerry Goldsmith under the bus, but he makes music that sounds like fuck that guy. No, he's a guy that sounds, you know, like he makes music that sounds like Looney Tunes cartoons. At the time, it made sense. It was like what people wanted, where it's just like someone falls down the stairs and like he ran the mallet down a xylophone. It's just like now music is much more subtle. It's much more natural in the way that it's used. There's much more licensed music, which is also what we're, you know, talking about. But it's just about music that supports the scene, that fits naturally in there, you know. So I do think that that's like. You know, important. That's why, like, when they're asking for something specific, they're not asking you to, like, because a lot of times you'll get a scene. I'll speak for this side as like a licensor. Like, they might say, like, you know, Ruth and Brenda break up. We don't know if that's important or not, right? Like, we don't know if it's important. It might sound. I might read them and be like, holy shit, 2 characters breaking up. That's probably important. For all I know, it's a montage of a character breaking up with 5 people in a row for comedic purposes. I don't know. Like, they can tell me. I need to follow their direction and say, like, what kind of music do you need, and then also like them. Also, what fee is appropriate for that? Which gets me to a question. Indie artists, you've talked about working on stuff with small budgets. You've talked about working for things that, or whatever, you know, you get squeezed. You had to license a big Lady Gaga song you didn't know you had to license when you got on board. All of a sudden, your budget is next to nothing. So you might be working with very little on something. Have you ever had someone try to secure a license, and does it ever work, by undercutting the fee that you're offering? Does that make sense? Like by lowballing you, by saying like, okay, I know you're getting a bunch of music for this, and I know you said you have $2,000. How about you use mine and you use it for free? I just want this license. Has anyone ever done that to you?
No.
And would you say yes?
Is that mean, have we ever been on the take?
No, I don't think so. I mean, because I just
no,
think,
I know that's another part of that potentially.
I mean, I do want to make sure. I don't think that would. I mean, I think it's like a bad approach. I would never. I'm just saying, I don't think it's like an unethical thing to do. I could see someone trying to think of that as like, oh, this is how I'm going to like get in there, is by telling you could use all my music for nothing. You just tell, you know, like whatever. Like, what's
let me Here's my thought about that. When we want a song, we want a song. It's not that another song, because it's cheaper, is going to be better. It's not. It's going to be what it is. And if we can negotiate a deal for the song we want, for the budget that we have, we'll do that. If someone's offering a package deal to use 3 or 4 songs for X amount of dollars, we might not like the other songs, so we can't really do that. You know, maybe that might work when you walk into the Gap and you can get a pair of socks, pair of underwear, and jeans. We kind of all need that. I mean, I do. There might be a couple people that
Shopping
don't.
spree.
So I've never done that. I mean, there might be there's certain projects that might. I'm thinking of a documentary film, for example, that may want to use all Universal artists. It's about artists from 20 years ago. So there's that, because then they become a bit of a partner and they give you a better fee on some of their recordings that they own and all that stuff. I don't know if it's going to happen, but that's some idea. Mm-hmm. But if Terrorbird came to me or somebody came to me and said, hey, use 5 of our songs and you'll get this deal, that would be great if you had 5 songs that we wanted to use. So it's always a creative first. And we know that of the 12 songs that are being thought of for the scene, they're all about the same price.
Does that make
helpful?
sense? I just want, I mean, because to me, I feel like sometimes, you know, especially independent artists, they want to know how they can hustle to do, you know, like what can I do to get in there? What can I do to get ahead of this other stuff? If like it's me or Bjork, and
I have
Bjork's winning every
sort
time.
of the reverse.
Okay.
Whereas, like, let's say I have $2,000 for a scene, but I have another song that's not really figured out yet. Sometimes I will go to licensors and say, I have $2,000, and if you can sign a quote for me that says you'll do this for $2,000, I promise you if I have $3,000 extra dollars that I find, I will give it to you.
Yes.
But I don't really do it like that. Yes, I've done it like
good.
4 times.
All right.
It does. I mean, I can say as a licensor it does happen, which is awesome. I mean, that to me, I think speaks to like,
And that's all about relationships.
It's all about relationships. And even what Michael was saying about sort of like the long tail nature of working in a business like this, that this is not a one-time endeavor. It's not a one-time transaction. It's not just buying a pair of socks, right? You are trying to create a working relationship with someone who's going to be doing this for their career while you are, and that those things work in tandem. So like to say like, okay, I get that this might be more valuable, quote unquote valuable, right? Because the value of a copyright is a largely intangible thing that, you know, you might say, I normally would like to see this around this number. I'd like to get more money, but I understand that you're working under certain constraints and you're not trying to like pocket the difference. That like, I'm happy to work with you and work this out because it seems like a cool project and we like working with you, or you make this easy or whatever it is. Because I mean, we do tend to find licensing begets licensing, whether it's from that music supervisor or not. There's something kind of cosmic about that. And also that there is that more grounded thing of that, yes, sometimes music supervisors are very appreciative that like you help them out when they thought they had a really tight budget, and lo and behold, either more money was freed up, a cue fell out in an edit or something else like that, so they ended up with a little bit more money. Now, I'm gonna speak for you and say they don't want to lose their budgets. They want to maintain the budgets they have. They don't want to show that they can do something for less. They want to show that they can get as much money out to rights holders as possible, because that keeps them with good budgets for next season, for the next film project, right?
And I'll also add that even though we are hired by a production company or directors or an ad company or whatever, at least for me, I will always try to get an artist the most money I can. And unfortunately, sometimes it's $250, and sometimes it's $1,000, sometimes it's $3,000. It's a budget game, and as much as it's a creative game, it's a budget game, and it's something that we struggle with because we're music lovers. Yes, we love our clients, and we love film, and we love TVs, and we love ads, and we love all that media. But we're music lovers, and we want you guys to succeed. We want to put money in your bank account. I just want to talk about that for 1 second. Putting money in your bank account's one thing. However, and I know it's one of the most important things, we've got to pay rent and we've got to do all of our stuff. But I will also say, as a music supervisor, not as an artist, and I'm happy to have this discussion in a few minutes, with so much content out there and the amazing access to your music throughout the world, having a song play, and let's say on a TV show or in a film, let's say it's on Netflix, for example, and Netflix is in 8 million countries around the world. most of their shows go to all those countries. In Canada, we sometimes don't have a couple of them. But, so you get a couple $1,000 and you wanted $5,000. That $2,000 is one thing. But that, and I'm going to say the word exposure, and I know you can die of exposure. We've had that conversation before. But that, especially that, even if it's a background, but of course if it's a montage or it's featured in some way, I've seen the numbers on something that happened recently, not that I worked on, but the spike for that band and the number of either Spotify hits or YouTube watches of their video or downloads on iTunes, etc., or people went and bought merch, or they wanted to go buy tickets, or to your show, or they're checking out where you're touring, or they follow you on Twitter. I could go on and on. That's important because that's building your career. So I appreciate that you guys want money, and so do we as supervisors, to be honest, and so does everybody in the world. But the idea that it's part of your marketing plan, it can't be the only thing, but it's part of your marketing plan. There's touring, which is a huge thing. Obviously, the Spotify mechanicals are not great, and whatever you get from iTunes is, I think, a typical mechanical. But going on tour and selling merch and doing whatever you do with your content, and having a sync and having a couple of syncs and being able to promote that on your socials, getting it out there to other people, it's all part and parcel of what you do. It's not just about that $2,000 or $3,000 up front. Discuss.
Yes, or I mean, hell, if it's $20,000 or $50,000 or $100,000, right? Like, those are more rare, but it still is just one part. And like, we'll even see things where like, hey, the payday was solid, but then like a sort of a letdown when we've even had things fall through that never aired that we're still legally obligated to be paid for. And it's like, everyone's like, cool, thanks for the check, but at the same time, we missed out on maybe this big opportunity or something that a manager thought fell out of a cut and said, hey, what happened to this? I thought it aired last night. And we go back and listen to the show, and it was so deep in the background that you had to put on headphones to hear it. So like, they still got paid, but the fact is no one's ever going to Shazam that song. It's not going to be that thing that like puts them over the top. So like, I don't mean to say that and to make it sound like it's flying in the face of what Michael says, because I want to put that as like I want to like block quote that and put it on our website. But I think that there's that exposure can, from these things can be real. And the biggest thing that Michael said that I completely agree with is that it's one piece of your marketing mix. It's not a lottery ticket. It's just something that it's not a winning lottery ticket. It's just something that it's a lottery ticket. It's got
to play to win, right?
That's right. You got to be in it to win it. And this panel brought to you by the Idaho Lotto. There's a lot of. The big thing is it's just one piece of everything else you do. It's not going to be the be all end all. It can be, but it is all part of that larger piece. And it's always important to remember, and especially when it gets into sort of like, the haggle of value, right? Like even a placement on one episode of a show, even if you could have back-to-back 30-second featured vocal placements on 2 episodes of Riverdale, and they might pay entirely different rates. And that has nothing to do with you or your copyrights, maybe. It could just be a function of their budget for that episode, so on and so forth. There's a lot of factors that go into it. I think the important thing to remember is that like, this is not a combative relationship, not between us as a third party and our music supervisors, and certainly not between our clients or any artists or labels or whatever and the music supervisors. And some people treat it like that. They treat it like a sport. They treat it like they're out there actively trying to undercut you, or like they're pocketing this money that they don't pay you. And that's just not the case. It is about working together to create the best product that's going to get them maybe an Emmy, or maybe get them their next job, or I think it's an important thing to bear that in mind.
Well, music is our resource. So without the music, we wouldn't have a job, right? So we need you, but we also live this incredible lifestyle. I've always felt privileged to be a music supervisor, to be around creative people all the time, and to be around incredible musicians and incredible other people within that world. And I think that's. I think you're right. We don't look at it as we're here to negotiate. We have to, but we're here to help everybody else out. We're here to help the production out, us out, you out, the other people out, the label out, the third party, all that kind of stuff. I want to just mention one thing. We worked on a TV show called Degrassi. I don't know if anyone watched it, but we worked on it for about 10 or 12 years. I can't remember. And we did
The
something.
middle seasons.
Pardon me?
That's the middle seasons. It feels like it's been on for a long time.
35 years. We did the last 12 or something. But we did something that I had a thought one day. I was like, you know what? I want to see what happens with these songs that have been placed in Degrassi, which were in 190 countries before it hit Netflix. Like, forget Netflix for a second. Last couple seasons were there. So we reached out to about 25 independent artists, and we said, can you do me a favor? Here's when your episode's airing. For the next 2 months, track some stuff. Track your downloads, track your, I think Spotify was around, I don't remember. Track your YouTube hits, track your merch, track your Twitter feed, all that stuff. We got the metrics back, and they just ballooned. It was incredible over those 2 months. Now, the other interesting thing is that a lot of the episodes had not even aired in Australia or Germany or England yet. It was really the US and Canada. I think they were kind of day and day. And so it works. It helps. And like you said, it's a part. It's a part.
And it can be very big. We've had artists get gold records out of syncs. We've had, artists have their, those metrics jump by hundreds of percentage points overnight, literally, from that connection that you can now much more easily make between what you're watching and what you're listening to. I would like to open it up to questions, if you can. There's a microphone we got. If anybody has any questions, raise your hand and we'll get you the microphone and wait till you have the mic.
Don't be shy. We're here. Uh-oh. Except for you.
Oh, boy.
Get ready. All right, good. One of the more interesting parts for me in this conversation as a music supervisor was you guys talking about the producer's role and maybe their feedback. And I did wonder immediately whether it might be a cultural thing, Michael, if you're working on mainly Canadian productions, or a money thing, if it's indie versus studio. Do you talk amongst yourselves, see if there's a difference? I was just very keen to know that.
Well, all my projects are indie projects, so I feel like that's backwards of what I might expect in terms of producer involvement.
You expect it to be
I'd
bigger
expect
cluster
studio,
at the studio.
Yeah. It probably is, though, and it's just more than it is for me. But it's
I gather there might be a little more red tape in Los Angeles. We don't have big studios. We have E1. We have, there's going to be another one I'm going to forget at the moment, and I apologize to whoever it is. But what we're finding is that we have a lot of co-productions. So a lot of the shows that I'm working on really are coming from the States, but they come to Canada because the tax credits are amazing. The dollar's like at $1.30 at the moment. Back when I did Queer as Folk was at $1.56, which was insane. And the crew and the post-production teams have had 20, 30 years now of experience and are now world-class. So they can do everything in Canada. So in a couple of shows that I'm working on, TV shows now that I'm working on, the budgets are much bigger in terms of music licensing. The Canadian TV series, and I'm talking Canadian TV series, so Handmaid's Tale might seem like a Canadian TV series, and it kind of is because it's shot there, but it's really an American world coming to Canada to co-produce, and that had a little bit of money. But a Canadian TV series like a Degrassi, like there's a TV show called Private Eyes that we work on. Jason Priestley's the lead. It's 3 seasons in. They have challenging budgets, and Private Eyes had a very challenging budget, and they know it, so I can say it out loud. And we're always trying to get a little bit more money. So they'll give us $6,000 or $7,000 an episode, but we have to put 10 songs in there. We're not sure how to do that, but we figure it out somehow. So culturally, yes, in that way. We don't have to place Canadian songs necessarily. I love the Canadian music scene, so I'm a little biased. Doesn't mean I'm not going to place Idaho music, don't worry. But we don't necessarily have to. Sometimes there's a bit of a spend issue, which is a whole tax thing, which we won't get into. I don't know if it's the same, and it's probably not the same in Los Angeles, but I would say there's much less red tape because there's, again, a lot of independent or Canadian-centric stuff, and they just don't budget a lot of money for music, and I'm going to call it a fight that I've been having for 20 years that really kind of hasn't changed a lot.
Yeah, maybe it's just
Good
treated
question.
as a post-production role in a sense where it's just like they would treat any of the other production elements.
Yeah, I think a lot of producers count on music to save their movie instead of thinking of it as like, this is an integral part of my movie. And a lot of producers are awesome, and they care about music and they budget for it appropriately, but I would say like 50% don't.
Right. Or they're thinking like, hey, we got Chris Evans to do this for scale. You're thinking small. Why can't you get,
Right.
Portugal the Man for this? That,
Right.
like it's not where it's just clearly not the same thing at all.
And that's why there's less red tape in Canada with some of these films and TV shows in terms of, Laura having to deal with producers for final decisions. And it's usually, again, a director who's found $2 million through government funding and family and friends and on provincial funding and broadcast license and all that, and they're in charge. But again, TV is usually a creative producer, I think, everywhere.
Any other questions? You in the buffalo plaid cap.
Yes.
Oh, you got the Canadian outfit on. Thank you. I love it.
Budgets aside, when looking at the culture of TV and movies these days, are we seeing still a huge influence of mainstream or no music, or is it becoming more of a platform for emerging or new independent artists?
Can I take that one? It's for our business. It's entirely new and emerging artists. I mean, well, I'd say 85% of our business is unknown artists making music now, right? That is not and that's why we really do see it as part of your marketing mix. Like someone might be hiring Terrorbird to do a radio campaign, and we're also pitching the music for licensing. So this might be the first record they're putting out there in the world. They're just getting press. They're just getting attention. They're doing all that stuff. And cool if we're able to like get a sync for them. We're also aware that it's like we're talking about. It can be longer term than that, but we see a lot of licensing for independent artists in all media.
Yeah, I think percentage-wise, it's almost entirely upcoming artists. Money percentage-wise, I know you said putting aside money, but money percentage-wise, it's almost entirely known artists, which is a terrible ratio, like paradox. But usually I get a movie and they want 10 famous songs, and I say, you can have one, and it will take up 90% of our budget, and then I'll have 10% of our budget to do everything else. And that's like pretty classic situation for me. Whether or not I want that to be the case is obviously different.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's important to talk budgets, because I think also seeing that, it's like you can just get mad about that if you want, but like there's good money. I don't want to like make this sound like everybody's getting peanuts for independent licenses. It's just not true. Like there's a good living to be made if you if this can be part of your music mix. They're just all over the map, and I think it's still the right song for the right scene. Like Michael's publishing pal said, there's a scene for every song and a song for every scene, right? That you can. There's always a place. It just might not come up right away. It could be there, but like usually when it's the right thing, you can also get paid for it. Like but the thing is, the majors are looking at sync as a bigger piece of their pie than they did 10 years ago or 20 years ago, or certainly before that. So they're counting on that money more. I think they're charging more for it as a result, and they think I think in some cases are kind of overestimating the value of that music, and it's kind of a bubble for them that I think is bursting.
It's a really great question, because I actually talked about it twice, once last night and once today, because I was at the advertising panel yesterday, and Todd mentioned that it's, and correct me if I'm misquoting you. I'm not going to quote you verbatim because I could never. Your English command of your English language is so good, but when they're looking for a campaign for a song for a campaign, they want a band to maybe have some followers or have a little bit of a buzz, let's say. Maybe not in every case. I know there was Apple usually tries to find a song from anywhere under a rock, which is great. But maybe in Todd's case, he was talking about it. You want to have some followers, and a bit of a buzz. From my point of view, I would love to find you if it's the first song you ever wrote in your basement and hear it the next day. We couldn't care less about any of that. What we care about is the production, the lyric, the vocal, the theme, how well it's constructed, how good it sounds, how it fits, the specific tempo, and the list goes on. So you could have 5 followers, and hopefully you'll have 105,000 followers 10 days later after it airs. So yes, emerging artists is something that we love. It's also what directors and producers love. They love that idea of going, oh, we're going to use that song and it's never been used before. Oh, this is great. Can we get it for $50? No, we're actually going to pay them a proper amount of money for that use. I don't care who they are, paying what we can. But yeah, it's a really good question, and it's really important to note that I think most supervisors, if I may speak on their behalf, love the emerging world. And nothing against the labels and the Shawn Mendes's of the world. He's Canadian, and a few other artists, obviously big artists that we all love. But for us, our one of the reasons we do this job, I think, is to discover those new artists, and that's why one of the reasons why we're here, and why we love it, and why we want to run around and lose our voice and drink olive oil before we go drinking, so we can consume more.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, it's a
All
thing.
right, I'll do it.
Yeah. More
any-
questions? Come on.
Oh yeah.
Is this on? Thanks. So you guys were talking about emails and stuff, and kind of like finding songs that way. In my day job, that's what I look at a lot, is emails. And I was just wondering, how much of a hustle should that kind of be? Sometimes if I find an email and I'm like, oh, that's right, I need to do that, right? It kind of sparks my memory again. And then, is there a fine line between kind of annoying, even for like the licensing company, or
Following up.
Or following up, exactly.
I don't think it's a very fine line at all. It's really annoying really quickly. The initial email, I love them, and I will listen to it. And then I love meeting people at these kinds of things, and I think that is, for me personally, a lot more impactful than chasing me, because I have people that are paying me chasing me. So then to have people who are not paying me chasing me is like too much chasing. And I don't have the emotional stability for that. It's just too much.
Yeah, I think the follow-up is really tough, and this is not a holier-than-thou statement whatsoever, but when you're getting 1,000 emails every couple of weeks with SoundCloud links and listen to my music, and from everybody, not just from independent artists, but from around the world.
Universal sends 4 emails a day. Like 4 emails a day. It's too much.
Well, although,
like 4 too many,
and that
am I
means
right, guys?
that means that she's checking her email, because she's counted 4. So she's seeing the emails. We're all seeing the emails, and everybody. And so you just have to be patient. And if you want to follow up a month or so later, great. If you still don't hear from us, hopefully we're still in business, number one. And secondly is, if we are, we'll get back to you. We might not get back to you. We'll get back to you if we hear something we like. That's kind of how it works, at least in our world. We used to get back to everybody when they sent us an email about 5 or 6 years ago, and then we were like, no, we can't, because that's a job in itself. So if we had an intern or a junior, let's say, and that was their job, amazing. I can't do that, because I've actually got to run a business and do the creative and be on the phone with the people that are paying us. That does not mean that Laura can be bought by any of you. If you pay her, she'll listen to your music. That's not what she's saying.
I wish you had said that. That would have been so cool.
We didn't chat about a master and a sync for the folks who had never licensed before, like the
Folks who have never licensed,
nitty-gritty.
the real. Do you want a little
I think we should do a little
quick
something.
hit on that? That like.
What it is, what is the licensing?
What is a license? Okay, it's any audiovisual. I guess we could have done this in minute 0, but there, a license, right, is taking something that exists, a copyright. Anytime you have an audiovisual medium that is marrying music with picture, you need to license that music. So you're paying for 2 copyrights. In the U.S., it's performing arts copyright is the song, the composition, right? It's owned by you, the songwriter, unless you assign that right to a publisher or a third party. And you also are licensing the master, which is owned by you as it's recorded, unless you've assigned that right to a record label or a third party. So if so anytime you're licensing something, you have to get both. Like these guys have to get both licenses. That might mean, and those things are typically valued equally. What's called an MFN or most favored nations basis, meaning if the label gets paid, $2,500, the publisher gets paid $2,500. But let's say you have a really famous copyright like Laura's Lady Gaga example, and it's a karaoke version. You don't need to pay. Michael had that. Everybody remembers that. Michael's example. I get them confused all the time. Michael's example of the karaoke thing. They're gonna, maybe they'll go to Sound Choice or a karaoke company of some kind to license that master, or maybe they'll have the composer on the show make a karaoke sounding version of that master. They can negotiate whatever fee they need to for that master. The thing they need to worry about is that underlying composition. That's the famous part. Now, it still can happen that a composition, say like if you covered a song, that you can get that cover version can be valued just as much as your master of that cover could be valued as much as the underlying composition if it's what they need. And that's really it. Either if it's equally famous, Jimi Hendrix, All Along the Watchtower, right? Bob Dylan and Columbia, Capitol Records, Universal now, Universal Music Group, and whoever publishes Bob Dylan, Uncle Robert, they can get paid the same. They'll likely get the same fee, right? That would be an MFN thing. Even a new version, if it's just like you need a super cool modern sounding version of a Hall & Oates song, then you might be able to do it because it's what they need for that, especially in the ad world.
And we
That's
did that. We did that for a TV show. We got the copyright, the song that Hall Oates and a couple of other people wrote. Actually,
Really?
Oates was not a writer.
I knew that.
Sorry. I was just checking to see if you were listening. And we used it as a theme song for Private Eyes. The song was called Private Eyes. And we got a band in Canada called Deer Rouge, which was kind of an up-and-coming band. And we had them record it. Didn't cost us as much because nobody kind of knows the band. Cost us a bit of money to have the publishing rights for the theme song. And the other thing before we get kicked off the stage, I can see... Oh, we're not getting kicked off yet? If you co-write a song with somebody... If you co-write a song with somebody and you pitch it to any supervisor, ensure that that writer is going to be okay with, number one, you pitching it, and that maybe you can either act on their behalf or at least let them know that when an offer comes in, that you can accept it. I would, unless you're not talking to the writer anymore, that's a bit of an issue. And it can be a huge issue, and it's a huge issue in our world with famous songs that you would know. There's litigation, you just can't license the song, period. Even if you had $500,000, it's like, no, because they're going to think it's worth $5 million. And they haven't been agreeing for years, so why would they agree on this? Also, do not put samples in your music. If you want to, go for it, but they may never get licensed. We did that for a TV show called Queer as Folk. Very first episode, the editors put a song in, and that happens sometimes. And I'm listening to it, I'm like, it's a Michael Jackson sample, 100%. Well, everybody loved it. The network loved it, the producers loved it, everybody. So we went out and we got the sample cleared, but it certainly cost them about double what they thought it was going to cost them. But then they gave us $7 million over 5 years to license music, so that was okay. They had money. They had some money. And it was a music-heavy show, so they realized that.
That's important to note even with things that if you don't think you can get away with it. So like I'm talking about copyrights before as far as what you're licensing. Keep in mind a license, a song existing in a TV show or film, that's a derivative work in the same way that a remix is a derivative work, in the same way that putting a sample in your song is a derivative work. You're utilizing someone else's copyright, whether that's the picture that's owned by a studio and your song, right? That's the agreement you're making. Or someone else's recording and composition within the body of your own recording and composition. Doesn't matter if you think it is like no one's going to know what it is or it's obscure enough or whatever. Really just don't do it. It's kind of, if you want to license your music for film and TV, especially as like an up-and-coming artist, it's not worth it. You're better off recreating those sounds as best you can than including a sample.
I would also just add that when you do license a song, 99.999% of the time it's non-exclusive, which means that if Laura licenses it on a Tuesday and I call you on Thursday and I want the same song, I can use it. That's not going to happen. because I'd like to think I'm not going to license the same song as somebody else. It happens. It's hard to get away from it sometimes, but the idea is that 6 months later, a year later, you can license it. Different for advertising, but ask Todd, or maybe you can tell them.
This seems like a good time to also plug. Hopefully you guys went to the music and advertising panel. There's also a song specifically about writing music for trailers tomorrow. It's here at 11. Is that right? Cool. And then also back here at 3:30 tomorrow is a listening panel at 3:30. 3:30. Pretty sure it's 3:30. Check your schedules. Was
Ask Eric. He did a peace sign +1. 3.
It's at 3.
Thank you.
Killer, come here at 3. Don't come late, guys. Come on. Any other questions? Ooh, yeah.
So I know that the conversation has mostly been about licensing songs. My question is, if you, as music supervisors, are also involved in the selection of scene composers who are actually scoring what's going on the screen, and what is that like, and what are you looking for?
Yeah. Yes. And
All the time? On every project or most projects?
I would say 70% of the time. And then maybe 70% of that 70% I'm involved creatively and not just negotiating with the agent of the composer the director wanted.
Got it.
And what was your second part of that question?
What do you look for, and what's it like?
Oh, what do I look for? I mean, I think it really depends. Score depends so much on the project, as it should, because it is so intertwined with the picture. And it also really depends on what kind of director you're working with and what kind of composer the director works well with, because I think there are a lot of different types of people in those worlds. So there isn't really a way to answer that question. It is just like, what is right for the right project? And I think in a lot of I'm working on a lot of like upper level indie films. So for better or worse, they care a lot about credits. But it's always fun when someone's willing to take a chance and we're basing it just on music. But I would say that only happens like 25% of the time.
So, and you're mostly probably going to composer agents to get those folks, and these are seasoned film composers. You're
Right.
rarely probably asking.
I mean, sometimes, we'll want a band. I really hate this phrase, but a band sound for the score, which like means nothing.
Yeah.
But I know what producers want when they say that, which is kind of like a singer-songwriter-y acoustic score.
Oh, interesting.
And then we might pair a band with a more seasoned composer,
Okay.
so that you can trust that they'll be able to deliver, but you'll get the sound you want.
Mm-hmm.
But it's complicated.
Okay. And what about, I mean, I think even like there's probably a lot of bands who they might make ambient music or instrumental music that see their music as very cinematic and feel like I'm already scoring a movie that's in my head. How do they get in?
Well, I think that
score?
the thing about that's really tricky is the key point of your sentence was you're scoring the movie in your head, but when you're a score composer, you're scoring the director's movie, not your movie, and that can be really hard for some artists to understand, where their creative opinion, no matter how correct it is subordinate to the director's opinion, and the director has that title for a reason. I mean, which is just as true for our creative opinions as music supervisors. But I think if you want to get into that, then, look for those indie filmmakers near you. Also, I think college films, those filmmakers go on a lot of times to be important filmmakers. And, just get in there where you can. And also, I think sometimes doing original compositions, like one-offs, individual cues or individual tracks is a good way to start.
I will say that both BMI and ASCAP, I'm not sure about CSAC, have really great scoring. They have composer workshops. They do once a year. Both do once a year. BMI's is at the Sundance Labs, and ASCAP's is, I believe, in LA. But yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know a lot of the resources in the area, so I'm not exactly sure how to answer it. But my first answer is that 99% of the time we have to hire a Canadian composer. So if you'd like to come up to Canada, come on down. Borders are open for all Americans. Secondly is I agree with Laura, and I've talked to a lot of composers about it, that you've got to go and work on a short film, or you've got to go work on a friend's trailer, or go to indie film festivals and meet people and like-minded people and say, I'll work on your film. I don't want to say the word for free, but people do it because, or, excuse me, the other thing to do, like you said, is find a movie and score it, because you've got to practice. And it's not easy. I don't know if you're an artist or a composer.
I'm a composer.
You're a composer, yeah. Because being an artist and being like a band or an artist, a singer-songwriter, is very, very different than being a composer. And that was a great point that you made, that sometimes a pair a band with, or an artist with a composer, which is what we're doing on this TV show in Canada. We have a guy who I can't mention now, who's kind of an artist in Canada, and he's going to get paired with kind of a composing team who understands all about the world of syncing it up properly, and deliverables are kind of crazy, and the mixing and all of that. It's a very, very, it's not an entirely separate skill set, but it is a unique skill set, and you can learn it. I mean, what's his name? Trent Reznor learned it, or maybe he had somebody else learn it for him on how to deliver, but he had to understand the idea of scoring. It's different than writing a 4-minute, or in his case, a 9-minute song.
Well, he worked with Atticus Ross, right?
Those are
Those are
things
things that you're
Yeah, you pair up with a programmer.
That's right.
I mean, even like a Mogwai or Explosions in the Sky, people have done that kind of stuff before. Like, that probably is like a lot of back and forth before you're getting that, or maybe there is someone working with them. If one thing about scoring, you're gonna be like working for free or finding filmmakers. There's also a small film festival portion of Treefort. Go talk to people there, and you would be surprised. But like, I think also being realistic. If you're talking to someone and you do have hard costs, that you're just like, I can do this. If you're talking to an independent filmmaker, they're probably raising money, right, for their next project. If you can factor in like, hey, if you can get me X amount of bucks for this thing when you're doing your Kickstarter or anything else like that, that's a way to at least ensure that maybe like you're getting a few bucks for your work, even if it still is like largely kind of on spec.
Yeah, I think it also, one of the limiting factors in terms of going out to less experienced composers is if the filmmakers want, for example, live strings or things that they're going to be investing a lot of money in, and they are more afraid of taking that risk at that point. Whereas if they're okay with an electronic score or like a sample-based score, not the samples we were talking about earlier.
No, but like using native instruments or something for your
then I think they're a little bit more willing to take those risks.
Mm-hmm.
But like an orchestral score, they're going to want to put in hands they trust.
Sorry, and the
Hans
other
Zimmer forever.
and the other thing is that it's also about relationships. Like, directors use the same composers for years, as we know. So if you can find some filmmakers, again, I don't know the area in the filmmaking world here, or it's in another state or it's somewhere else. Sorry, Idaho, but if it's in another state, you've got to, at some point you might meet somebody and they're going to make a film. They're going to make another film. First couple might be shorts, but there's these shorts get into South by Southwest or Sundance or wherever, and I've seen it happen with a couple of Canadian composers, and it's been amazing to watch that they started with a short film and now they're doing feature films, and they're probably going to do the same. You're going to work with that director for as long as the director makes films. Relationships, it's huge. It's everything. I think there was someone back here, yeah.
We have time for one more? Okay, cool. One more back here.
So as I've been listening, being a music supervisor sounds like a really cool job. And I guess I'm just wondering like how competitive it is, and maybe how you guys got your foot in the door, and yeah.
Well, I got a bruise here on my lip from one of them, so.
They're constantly fighting.
Yeah, there's a lot of us now. So I think that there's always a lot of people up for the same job. Especially, I don't know about, I've done mostly film, and I think that's especially true in film, although I'm sure it's true in every asset. But I started interning. I had 6 internships. I grew up in LA, so I started interning when I was 17. And yeah, you just paying your dues and working a lot. Eventually, hopefully it works out.
I think it's friendly competition. Sometimes not as friendly. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that it's friendly. I think that there are 3 guilds now. There's one in Canada, one in the U.S., and there's UK and Europe. And so there's about, I'm going to throw out a number of 320 supervisors that we know of, and there could be another 50 or 60 so in the rest of the world. It's a pretty small community, and I've gone to a lot of different, very fortunate to go to a lot of different conferences and panels and met. There's not a music supervisor that I did not like, and I'm happy to say that. And I think that we're music lovers, and we love what we're doing, and we're part of the creative process. And like I said before, we get to meet everybody, and we can share stories. Yes, there's going to be competition. There's 23 of us in Canada, and 2 of those 23 work with me, so there's 3 of us. And we do a ton of projects, and that's great. And we're always up against somebody else for various shows. And then sometimes it's just a relationship that I've built over the last 20 years, and they keep coming back to me. And I don't go poach somebody else's relationships. I just won't do that. It's not worth it. I know that we have a good thing going. I don't need to do that. But I'd be thrilled to sit and talk to Laura about what her issues are, or maybe some great bands that she loves, or Todd about his advertising stuff, and Toddrick about all the crazy trailers that he makes, and get a sense of what goes on. We can talk about people who are easy to deal with in the industry, people who are a little more difficult, what's going on with the dollars and cents. It's a nice sister brotherhood, and I think that a lot of people want to get into the business. It's kind of interesting. I've noticed that in the last 10 or 12 years. I must get 3 or 4 emails a month. How do I become a music supervisor? Do I just listen to music? And as you can sense here, no, that's just not the way it goes. You can listen to music, but it's not everything. It's a very friendly competition, but I think we're all kind of in the same boat, and we always try to help each other out as opposed to push each other down.
And we get,
unless someone has something else to say about that over here, I don't know.
We get a lot of interns at Terrorbird. Again, we're on the pitching side. We're sort of the knot in the bow tie, right? Like, these guys are dealing with producers, production people who we don't know, so they can shit talk whoever they want after. But we're presenting our artists and labels to them to then present to their clients. So we get a lot of interns who have been able to transition to that side. But I mean, it's largely internships, because even entry-level jobs in music supervision, they want you to understand what a cue sheet is. They want you to understand some of the base elements of what's going on. There aren't really a lot of translatable skills, I feel like, from other industries, because a lot of that work is very industry specific. And so, but there are also a lot of paid internships with some of these companies, especially like music supervision companies, doing it because they need people to be on the ball, and they're doing actual work. So even though your title might be intern, you might be getting at least paid something to do that, and they have a track to kind of put you on to do that. And so, yeah, I highly recommend just researching who your favorite supervisors, just your favorite shows, movies, and that kind of thing. Just like check it out. If you like a lot of ad and trailer stuff, there's a lot of industry publications that will name check the folks who worked on those too.
And there are also a lot of articles out there, books, and I mean, there's a Berkeley class, but I think it's probably a little expensive to do online, as maybe some of you have checked out. But there's so many. It's been great because a lot of supervisors have been interviewed in the last bunch of years, because it's become this strangely popular kind of job in the creative industry, in film and TV and ads and trailers and everything, and video games. And there's a lot of great information that is put forth from a lot of these people, and how they got into the business, or where to go and what to do. And you can learn it on your own, not fully on your own, but you can practice by saying, I'm going to take a scene from a movie, and I'm just going to put some songs up there. Put the independent song, and I'm going to put the Neil Young type song, also Canadian. And so those are the kind of things that you can do to practice. And if you want to, talk to us, we're here, and I'm here all weekend.
I think it's important as a supervisor to become well-versed in music you don't like.
Yes.
And
Same
not
thing
just
from our
stick
side.
within your lane.
Yes, absolutely.
Because, I mean, I mostly use music that I wouldn't personally listen to. I like it all. Like, it's all at a quality I respect, but it's not necessarily like my favorite kind of music. And that's important and to be able to learn how to discern quality within genres you don't like is important too.
Yeah, you have to respect it. It's it's a big thing. It's like making sure that it's of quality and being able to understand that. Thanks everybody for your time today and being really attentive and awesome. And thanks again to Laura and Michael. If you please give it up for them.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Josh.
And then thanks again to Treefort for having us. So again, tomorrow, 11 a.m. trailer music. 3:30 is music listening. 3 o'clock, guys, come at 3. Come at 2:30. Jeez. But hopefully we'll see you then. We'll see you around.